Picture the draft sitting in your folder right now. It's got everything the Romantasy subgenre loves, the slow burn, the fake chord, all of it. On paper it should work, and it just doesn't. It reads like a slightly worse version of 3 books you've already read. And the worst part is you can't point to the line where it goes wrong, because nothing in it is technically broken. A ton of writers in this subgenre hit that wall. The quiet fear that their story is a cover band playing somebody else's hits. The good news is that the reason it happens is small and completely fixable. And it's almost never the thing you'd cut first. The first thing almost everybody does, and it's the wrong thing, is go straight at the tropes. The story feels generic, so out come the scissors. The fae have to go. The enemies to lovers is too on the nose. I understand that instinct completely, and following it is how a lot of genuinely promising drafts quietly get worse. The tropes were never the problem. Think for a second about why a reader picks up a fantasy romance in the first place. They're not putting up with the enemies to lovers, they came for it. The slow burn isn't something they tolerate. It's the entire reason the book is on the nightstand at 1 in the morning. In fantasy in general, a trope is basically a promise. The reader saw it on the cover or in the first chapter and thought, yes, that, give me that one. So when you strip it out to look more original, the very first thing you've done is break the one promise they actually showed up for. And let's just say the obvious thing, because everyone's already thinking it. A huge slice of modern romantasy reads the same because it's all reaching toward the same author. Sarah J. Maas more or less built the modern shape of this genre. A Court of Thorns and Roses, Throne of Glass, Crescent City, and she's become the gravitational center the whole field now orbits. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. Being influenced by the biggest writer in your lane is completely normal. Every genre has its anchor, but 1,000 imitators fall into the same trap. They copy what Maas put on the page, the fake chords, the brooding High Lord, without copying the one thing that actually made hers work. And that thing was never a trope at all. Which leaves a real question hanging. If it isn't the tropes, then what is it? Well, the answer starts with reframing what a trope even is. A trope is a tool, that's all. And a tool only curdles into a cliché when you use it without intention, when it's just sitting in the scene because the genre expects it to be there. It also was never about how many tropes you're using. You can stack 10 of them and still feel completely fresh, or lean on just 2 and still feel like a knockoff. Whether that "I've read this before" alarm goes off in a reader's head has almost nothing to do with the count, and almost everything to do with whether each trope is actually doing a job. The deepest version of a trope with no job traces all the way down to a single root. So let's go there, because everything else here hangs off it. You see, the root is almost embarrassingly simple. In a story that feels generic, the characters don't actually want anything. Or, and this is the sneakier, more common version, the only thing they want is each other. Or, worst of all, the only thing they want is to be wanted. Kurt Vonnegut had a rule for exactly this, and it might be the single most useful sentence in the whole video. He said every character should want something, even if it's only a glass of water. That's it, just want something. It sounds almost too obvious to bother with. And then you go back through a generic romance and actually check, and the floor falls out. Ask it plainly. What does the heroine want specifically and concretely on page 1 before the love interest ever walks in? Half the time the honest answer is nothing. She wants the plot to happen to her. She wants the gorgeous, brooding stranger to show up and make her feel things. And a character whose only want is for the gorgeous stranger to show up has nothing to do on the page except stand there looking good, waiting to be noticed. That is the engine failure underneath the entire subgenre sameness. And once you can name it, you'll start seeing it everywhere. Watch what happens the moment you fix it, though. Give that same heroine a real want. A throne she was cheated out of, a younger sister she's trying to buy back out of a debtor's prison, and suddenly the romance has somewhere to go. The love interest stops being ornamental and becomes a genuine problem. Maybe he's the obstacle standing between her and that throne, or maybe he's the one person alive who can help her take it back, and she hates how much she needs him. The enemies to lovers stops being 2 attractive people sniping for no reason, and becomes 2 people who want incompatible things and have to decide what they're willing to give up. Notice that the trope didn't change at all. The want underneath it did. And the want is what was generating every ounce of that tension you were trying and failing to manufacture by just making them rude to each other. And this isn't a theory that only works in literary fiction. Look at the romantasy that actually broke out. In Fourth Wing, Violet Sorrengail spends the whole first book trying not to die. Her own mother forces her into a war college where cadets are killed in training, and she's physically fragile in a place built to kill the fragile. Every early scene runs on that one want, survive the next trial, and romance is nowhere near the picture yet. Or take the book that arguably kicked off this whole wave. In A Court of Thorns and Roses, the very first thing Fair does is hunt in the dead of winter to keep her starving family fed. She wants to feed her family, and that want is on the page long before any High Lord turns up. The romance hits harder later precisely because there's already a real person standing there, wanting something, doing something, instead of a placeholder waiting to be swept off her feet. This is also why so much romance feels hollow even when every sentence is perfectly competent. If neither person wants anything except the other, then the second they get together, the book is over. There's no engine left running. But give each of them a want that lives outside the relationship, and the romance turns into something that actually costs them. Because choosing this person might mean giving up the very thing they came for. That's a real story. The version without the wants is just two beautiful people being attractive at each other for a few hundred pages. Now, the reason so many writers skip this step isn't laziness, and it isn't a lack of talent. It's that they're not yet clear on what their story is actually about. So the characters drift, the tropes rush in to fill that silence, and nothing underneath them is pointing anywhere. If that sounds familiar, that's exactly what my free story compass is built for. A short field guide with 3 tools, the spark, the story promise, and the logline, that get you clear on what your story is really about. So every piece of it, your character's wants included, finally points the same direction. It's free, and it's down in the description if you want it. With that said, let me show you a classic literary example that goes back much further than modern romantasy. Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy are the enemies to lovers couple everyone else is still imitating. The great-great-grandparents of every brooding lord and sharp-tongued heroine book on the shelf right now. 200 years of imitations later, that trope can feel like the most exhausted thing in all of fiction. So why does the original still land like a punch when the copies just sort of sit there? It's because the hostility is specific, and it's earned. Darcy isn't generically arrogant in a way the narration just asserts. At a crowded dance, he tells Bingley that Elizabeth is tolerable but not handsome enough to tempt me, and she is sitting close enough to overhear every word. That's not bickering. That's a real insult with a real cause, and it gives her a real reason to despise him. And she doesn't dislike him because the plot has a tension quota to hit. She dislikes him because of specific things he does and specific wrong conclusions she draws from them. Austen even hands you the diagnosis in the title. He carries too much pride. She carries too much prejudice. The whole romance is just the slow, specific process of each of them shedding the exact flaw they were named for. Now hold that up against the generic version in way too many romantasy drafts. Two beautiful people meet, are inexplicably furious with each other, snipe for 300 pages, and then kiss because we're near the end. There's no specific reason for the hatred, which means there's no specific change required to dissolve it. The hostility is pure decoration. Nothing real underneath it, so nothing real has to happen to earn the ending. The characters don't grow, the page count just runs out. That points straight at the rule sitting under this entire video, and it's older than the genre by a long way. The specific is what makes a thing feel real. James Joyce put it about as well as anyone. In the particular is contained the universal. The more precise and particular your characters and their conflict are, the less generic the whole thing reads. Because specificity is the one quality a copy can't fake. Which is why, when a love interest could be lifted clean out of your manuscript and dropped into any other book on the shelf without a single reader noticing, same brooding stare, same impossible cheekbones, no particular history, no particular want, what you've actually written is a placeholder where a character should be. So make that placeholder specific. Give them one real flaw and one real reason these two people collide and not some other two. Watch what specific actually looks like in practice. The generic version, he's a tall, dangerous warrior with a tragic past and walls around his heart, and you've met him in 100 books already. The specific version, he's a disgraced duelist who lost his sword hand and now teaches other people's children to fence, and he goes cold every time the heroine reaches for a blade, because the last student he trained died with one in her grip. Same brooding warrior trope, exactly. But now he carries a particular loss and a particular reason to keep her at arm's length. And not a single line of him could be lifted into somebody else's book. Do that, and the trope you were about to delete in a panic suddenly starts pulling its weight. And this isn't just an old books principle. The reason a Rhysand from A Court of Thorns and Roses or a Xaden from Fourth Wing stays lodged in readers' heads, while their 1,000 paler imitators blur together, is exactly this. They're built from a specific history and a specific want. A smolder and a tragic backstory you are told about but never feel? That was never enough. Okay, so say you've got a tired trope you genuinely love and you want to use it anyway. What are your real options? Most advice online acts like there's only one: subvert it, twist it into something unrecognizable, but that's a single tool on a much bigger workbench, and honestly it's not even the one you'll reach for most often. The first move is the one nobody finds exciting. Just do it properly. Play the trope completely straight, but attach it to a character who wants something and a conflict that's specific to them. Most of the time, that by itself is the entire fix. You don't need a galaxy-brained reinvention of enemies to lovers. You need Elizabeth and Darcy. The straight trope, fully motivated, executed with real specificity. Reaching for a clever twist too early is how writers skip the work that actually makes the trope land in the first place. And keeping that want alive runs deeper than any single scene. It's structural. The want has to be wired through the whole book, so it drives every chapter instead of fizzling out by chapter 3. That's what my full writing system is built around. The conflict triangle, where the external plot, the relationship, and the character's inner arc all pull on each other at once. So one want keeps the entire story in motion. If you want the complete 5-phase build for that, it's all there, and you can enroll today. More about that in the description below. Now, when you do want to do something fancier than the straight version, you've got 3 real tools. The first is subversion. Set the trope up so the reader is sure they know where it's heading, then turn it somewhere they never saw coming. Say your reader is braced for the classic moment where the cold love interest finally breaks and confesses, sweeping the heroine off her feet. Subversion is letting him open his mouth to do exactly that, and having her cut him off, because she sorted out her own feelings a chapter ago, and she's done waiting for him to catch up. Same beat, same payoff of the two of them landing together, but the reader didn't see that particular road in. The catch, and this is where a lot of writers fumble it, is that you can subvert how the promise gets kept, but you can't break the promise itself. Twist the road to the happy ending however you like. Rip the happy ending away from a romance reader entirely, and you haven't been bold. You've broken the contract they bought the book for. So subvert the path, but always honor the destination. The second tool is combination. Take 2 familiar tropes and crash them into each other hard enough that the friction throws off something neither one has on its own. Take fake dating. 2 people agree to pretend they're a couple for some practical reason, a family they need to fool, a rival they want to make jealous, and then of course catch real feelings along the way. It's a lovely trope, and it's old as dirt. So is the prophecy that says 2 people are written in the stars for each other. But fake dating someone a prophecy has told you you're fated to kill. Now those 2 tired tropes are openly at war. And the war between them is the part nobody's read before. The freshness doesn't come from inventing a brand new trope. It comes from the collision. The third tool is deconstruction, and it loops right back to where we started. Take the trope apart and ask what it's actually for. What does the reader truly want out of the cold, untouchable love interest? Usually it's the fantasy of being the single exception, of being chosen by someone who chooses no one else. Deconstruction means dragging that wish into the daylight and making the story actually reckon with it, instead of just zipping a leather jacket onto a man and praying the menace reads. So you ask the uncomfortable version of the question. What if a man who's cold to everyone but you is simply cold? And I'm the exception. Is the exact story people in bad relationships tell themselves every single day. Hold the trope up to that light and suddenly it's doing real work. A live wire the book is honest enough to grab. Fated Mates gets the same treatment. The shallow version sighs that destiny is romantic. The deconstructed version asks what it would actually feel like to have the biggest choice of your life made for you, by a power you never agreed to. You keep the trope your reader came for. You just stop letting it off the hook, and you make it mean something. So why does the generic version keep happening at all? Why do good writers, people who clearly adore this genre, keep turning out the same flattened copy of it? Almost always, it's because they reached for the tropes before they got clear on the story underneath. They're decorating a house that doesn't have walls yet. The tropes can't do a job, because there's no structure standing for them to do a job for. And that's oddly hopeful, because a clarity problem is fixable. You can sort it out on a single afternoon, no special talent required. There's an equal and opposite trap too, and it's the one the ambitious writers fall into. Terrified of being generic, they sprint the other way, subvert everything, refuse the reader every single thing they came for, and they end up somewhere just as forgettable, because a story that's nothing but twists and refusals is its own kind of predictable. You can feel the writer straining so hard to surprise you that the whole book curdles into a different flavor of the same problem. You see, being contrarian and being original were never the same thing, which gets at the one thing I most want you to carry out of this. Real originality is just the familiar made specific and handed a job. Nobody needs you to invent something no human has ever seen. There's nothing in this genre so new it's unrecognizable anyway. And chasing that ghost is how you end up writing nothing at all. Every trope you love is still on the table. The Fey bargains, the enemies who slowly become something neither of them planned for. You don't have to throw away a single one of them, you just have to make each one want something and belong to this story and no other. Do that, and the exact same tropes everyone else is reaching for will read in your hands, like nobody else on Earth could have written them. That, "I've read this before" feeling you started with, the one that made you want to grab the scissors? It was never a verdict on your tropes. It was the sound of tropes with nothing to do. Give them something to do, and it goes quiet. And in order to ensure you actually know how to use the main tropes the fantasy genre has to offer, watch this video here next, so misusing them doesn't push readers away from your own story.